The morning sun had just started to rise above the buildings, throwing a soft light across the quiet streets. The small coffee shop on the corner buzzed with life as people came in for their morning caffeine before work. The smell of roasted beans filled the air, mixing with the sound of chatter and the hum of the coffee machine. A young woman stood in line, waiting patiently with her hands wrapped around her phone. She looked calm, wearing simple jeans and a gray hoodie. Her curly hair was tied neatly, and she smiled politely when the barista asked what she wanted. Behind her stood a man in uniform. His badge shone on his chest and his sunglasses rested on top of his head. He looked like someone used to being noticed. Tall, confident, but with a certain hardness in his eyes. He tapped his fingers on the counter, clearly impatient. "Can we hurry it up?" he said loudly, his voice cutting through the soft background music. The woman ahead turned her head slightly but didn't say anything. The barista gave an apologetic look and tried to move faster. The man sighed dramatically. "Some people act like they've got all day," he muttered under his breath, but loud enough for others to hear. A few customers glanced his way, uncomfortable. The woman still didn't react. She simply stepped aside politely when her drink was called. As she reached for her cup, the man moved closer, pretending to adjust his sleeve, and his hand accidentally tipped over the cup of water on the counter. The clear liquid splashed across the woman's sneakers and onto her jeans. "Oh, my bad," he said, his tone flat and careless. The young woman looked down at her wet shoes. For a moment, the shop went quiet. She slowly looked up at the man, not with anger, not with shock, but with calm eyes that seemed to see right through him. "That says more about you than me," she said softly. Her voice was steady, and for a second he didn't know what to say. A few people in the shop exchanged looks. The barista froze, unsure whether to speak. The man chuckled, trying to shake off the tension. "Relax, it was an accident," he said with a smirk, and then he added under his breath, "Can't even take a little joke." She didn't respond. She just took a napkin, wiped the floor around her, and sat at a small corner table. The man ordered his coffee, still grinning to himself, acting as if nothing had happened. But people had noticed. A middle-aged woman sitting near the window whispered something to her friend. A young man with a laptop gave the uniformed officer a long, disapproving stare. The officer ignored them, picked up his drink, and walked toward the door. As he passed by the young woman, he gave a little laugh. "Hope that dries quick," he said. She looked up again, still calm. "Don't worry," she said. "It always does." He walked out, confident, his boots clicking against the floor. Once outside, he met another officer leaning against a patrol car parked out front. "What took you so long, man?" the other cop asked, sipping his own coffee. "Just some slow service," he replied. "And this girl inside, one of those types who think the world owes them something. I may have taught her some manners." His friend laughed, shaking his head. "You're going to get yourself in trouble one day." "Trouble?" the man said proudly. "Please, people like that never say a thing." She looked too soft to even argue. They got into the car and drove off, their laughter fading as the sound of the engine filled the street. Back inside, the young woman sat quietly, scrolling through her phone. A customer approached her, the same young man who had been working on his laptop earlier. "Hey," he said hesitantly. "I saw what happened. Are you okay?" She looked up, surprised. "Yeah, I'm fine, thank you." "I recorded it," he said, showing her the video on his screen. "If you want, I can send it to you. That was out of line." She smiled slightly. "You can keep it. Maybe someone else will need to see it more than I do." He nodded, a little puzzled, but respected her calmness. She finished her drink slowly, then left the coffee shop, walking down the street with quiet confidence. The barista watched her leave, shaking her head. "Some people really need to learn respect," she muttered under her breath. Later that day, the video began to spread online. Someone had posted it with the caption, "Cop spills water on woman for no reason." Within hours, it had thousands of views. Comments flooded in, some angry, some shocked, others calling for action. The officer had no idea. By evening, he was sitting at his favorite diner with a few coworkers, laughing and swapping stories. "You should have seen her face," he said between bites of his burger. like I'd committed a crime or something. Just water. His friends laughed, but one of them frowned. You sure that's the kind of image you want, man? You never know who's recording these days. He waved it off. Relax. Nobody cares about a small thing like that. At another table in the diner, an older man in plain clothes listened quietly. He didn't say anything, just watched the officer brag. He recognized the badge number on his chest. The next morning came quickly. The officer woke up late, still feeling smug from the night before. He checked his phone and saw a flood of messages. His social media was filled with tags and mentions. The video had blown up overnight. He clicked one link, and there he was, clear as day, spilling water on the woman, his smirk captured in perfect detail. The caption now read, "Officer mocks woman in public. Is this who protects us?" His stomach dropped. Comments poured in beneath the video, hundreds of people criticizing his behavior, tagging the police department, demanding accountability. He felt a wave of heat rush through his face. He grabbed his phone and called his friend. "Hey, you seen this?" "Yeah," his friend said nervously. "It's all over. People are mad, man. The department's gonna say something soon." The officer tried to laugh it off, but his voice shook. "It's just the internet, it'll blow over." But deep down he knew it wouldn't. At the same time, across town, the young woman sat in her office. Her calm expression hadn't changed since the incident. The video played softly on her computer screen as she read through reports. Someone knocked on the door. "Chief, have you seen this?" a staff member asked, stepping inside. She smiled gently. "Yes, I have." The staff member looked unsure. "That's you in the video, isn't it?" She nodded once. "Don't worry about it. Everything happens for a reason." Outside her office, people were already whispering about the clip. Nobody knew who the woman was, yet. But the department's leadership knew exactly what was coming. Later that afternoon, the officer received a message from his captain. "Report to the main office tomorrow morning. Mandatory meeting." He groaned, rubbing his forehead. "Great. Now I've got to sit through one of those sensitivity sessions." He didn't know that the person leading that session would be the same woman he had embarrassed at the coffee shop. That night he couldn't sleep. The laughter from his friends didn't sound as funny anymore. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the calm face of the woman he had spilled water on. Not angry, just disappointed. He thought about her words. "That says more about you than me." He didn't understand them at the time, but now those words echoed in his head. The next morning he dressed slowly, straightened his uniform, and stared at his reflection. He looked the same, badge shining, hair neat, but something inside him felt uneasy. As he walked into the station, the whispers followed him. A few officers looked up from their desks, trying to hide their smirks. Someone had printed a screenshot of the video and pinned it on the notice board. He ripped it down quickly, his jaw tight. "Real funny," he muttered. The captain walked out of his office and motioned him over. "You're going to attend a mandatory session today. New head of the Integrity Division is giving it. You might learn something." The officer sighed. "Yeah, sure, let's get it over with." He had no idea that his life and his view of respect was about to change completely. The room was filled with the quiet buzz of conversation as officers gathered for the mandatory meeting. Some looked bored, others curious. The officer from the coffee shop, the one whose video had spread online, sat near the back, his cap pulled low, hoping no one would notice him. He had barely slept. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing since last night. The video was still being shared, and even though the department hadn't made a public statement yet, he could feel the tension in the air. He looked around and saw a few familiar faces giving him quick glances. He could almost read their thoughts, and they had all seen the video. He tried to act calm, staring at his notepad, but his hands wouldn't stop fidgeting. Then the door opened, everyone turned. A woman walked in, dressed in a sharp navy uniform, her posture straight and confident. She looked composed, her eyes steady, but there was something about her presence that made the room quiet instantly. The captain followed behind her and cleared his throat. "Listen up, everyone. This is our new Police Integrity Division head. She'll be working closely with us on conduct and community relations. Please welcome Chief Ava Johnson." For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. The officer in the back froze. The name echoed in his head, Ava Johnson. It took only a few seconds for recognition to hit him like a wave. It was her. The same woman from the coffee shop. The same calm voice. The same eyes that had looked at him and said, "That says more about you than me." His throat went dry. He couldn't move. She looked around the room slowly, her expression polite but firm. Her eyes passed over him for just a second, long enough for him to know she remembered. Then she began to speak. "Good morning, everyone," she said with a warm smile. "I know mandatory meetings aren't the highlight of anyone's day, but I promise I'll make this worth your time." Her voice was calm but confident, the kind that made people listen. "We're here to talk about something simple: respect. It's the foundation of our badge. Respect for the law, for the people we serve, and for each other." She walked to the center of the room, every step quiet but strong. The officers followed her with their eyes. Some nodded, others leaned back, not sure what to expect. Ava continued, "We all wear the same uniform, but the truth is people don't just see the badge. They see how we act when no one's watching. They see how we treat others in small moments that never make it to a report." The officer shifted in his chair. Her words felt like they were aimed straight at him. She didn't mention the video, not yet. But the tone of her talk matched the event perfectly. "Sometimes," she said, "our job is less about control and more about compassion. It's not weakness to be kind. It's strength to stay calm when others test your patience." There was a soft murmur among the group. A few nodded in agreement. The officer avoided her eyes, staring at his pen. His face felt hot. Ava smiled slightly, letting her words sink in. "I know what some of you might be thinking. We deal with tough people every day. We don't have time to babysit feelings. But that's exactly when character shows. When no one is watching, when you could choose to hurt or humiliate someone, and instead you choose not to." The captain, standing at the back, folded his arms, clearly impressed. Ava's tone wasn't harsh, but it carried quiet authority. She turned and wrote 2 words on the whiteboard: power and purpose. "We have power," she said, tapping the first word. "Every single one of us. But power without purpose becomes dangerous. Our purpose is to protect, not to prove that we're stronger than someone else." The room stayed silent. "Sometimes," she added softly, "we forget that the people we meet are just people, not enemies, not obstacles. Just people trying to live their day." The officer in the back shifted again. He could feel a lump forming in his throat. She wasn't raising her voice, but her words hit harder than any lecture. Ava looked around the room. "When I started in this job, I was tested a lot. People made assumptions about me because of how I looked or where I came from. But I learned something important. You don't have to fight every insult. Sometimes your calmness teaches a louder lesson than anger ever could." Her eyes met his for just a second. This time there was no anger, just quiet understanding. The meeting went on for another half hour. Ava shared real stories, not from books but from her own experience. Moments when officers had made mistakes and learned from them. Times when small gestures of respect had changed lives. By the end, the room felt different. The usual joking and whispering were gone. Everyone seemed thoughtful. When the captain dismissed the group, Ava thanked everyone for their time. "We'll have more sessions in the coming weeks," she said kindly. "And my door is always open if anyone wants to talk." The officers began to leave. The officer in the back waited until most of them were gone. He felt a strange mix of shame and relief. He wanted to disappear, but also to apologize. He stood up slowly and walked toward her. She was packing up her files, calm and collected. When she noticed him approaching, she gave a small nod. "Chief," he said, his voice hesitant, "I just wanted to say thank you for the session." She smiled politely. "You're welcome, officer. I'm glad you found it useful." He paused, unsure how to continue. "I don't know if you remember me," he said awkwardly. Her expression stayed calm. "I do," she said simply. His heart sank. "Look, about that day, I was out of line. It was stupid. I shouldn't have acted that way." She looked at him for a long moment, then closed her folder and said, "You know what the hardest part about leadership is, officer?" He shook his head. "It's learning when to hold people accountable and when to give them a chance to grow." He swallowed hard. "I understand. I hope so," she said gently. "Because this isn't about me. It's about what kind of person you want to be on duty and off." He nodded slowly, not knowing what else to say. She didn't scold him, didn't humiliate him. Somehow her calm made him feel even worse, but also more determined to do better. As he turned to leave, she added quietly, "Everyone deserves respect, officer, even when we think they don't." He stopped, nodded again, and walked out of the room. Outside the meeting hall, the other officers were talking in low voices. Some discussed how good the new chief was, how she spoke differently than most leaders, not just about rules but about people. The officer didn't join in. He went straight to his locker, sat on the bench, and stared at his badge. For the first time in a long while, he saw it differently, not as a symbol of power, but as a reminder of responsibility. He thought about how easily he had mocked that young woman in the coffee shop. He thought about how calm she'd been, how she hadn't raised her voice, how she had handled the situation with more grace than he ever could have. He sat there for a long time. Then he pulled out his phone. The video was still all over the internet. But now, instead of anger, he felt shame and a strange sense of gratitude. Without thinking too much, he typed a message in the department's group chat. Today's meeting hit home. Chief Johnson's words made me think, we can all do better. He hit send before he could change his mind. Some of his coworkers reacted with thumbs-up emojis. Others stayed silent. But Ava from her office saw the message appear on her screen. She smiled softly and closed her laptop. Later that evening, the officer walked home, the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement. For the first time in a while, he didn't feel proud of the uniform. He felt humbled by it. He knew the road to regaining trust wouldn't be easy, but he also knew that one mistake didn't have to define him forever. He remembered her words again. Everyone deserves respect, even when we think they don't. This time, he truly understood what they meant. The next morning, the officer arrived early at the station. It wasn't like him to come in before his shift started, but he couldn't shake the thoughts from yesterday's meeting. Ava's words had stayed in his head all night. He had replayed them over and over, not just her voice, but the calm way she carried herself. It wasn't anger that made her powerful. It was the way she stayed in control, even when he had tried to embarrass her. He poured himself a cup of coffee and sat quietly in the break room. Normally, mornings were full of laughter, loud stories, and jokes between officers. Today, it felt different. People spoke softly, glancing at him once or twice. The video still hadn't completely died down online, and everyone in the department knew who it was. He didn't blame them for looking. He'd made a fool of himself. He just wished he could go back and undo it. The captain walked in, looked at him, and said, "Chief Johnson wants to see you in her office this morning." His stomach dropped. "Now?" The captain nodded. "She said it's not disciplinary. Just a talk." He nodded slowly, trying to stay calm. "All right, thanks." He walked down the hall, each step feeling heavier than the last. When he reached the door that read Chief Ava Johnson, he paused and took a deep breath. He knocked lightly. "Come in," her voice called from inside. He opened the door. She was standing by the window, sunlight streaming across her desk. She turned, her face calm as always. "Good morning," she said. "Morning, Chief," he replied, standing straight. "Have a seat," she said, gesturing to the chair in front of her desk. He sat down, his hands resting nervously on his knees. She looked at him for a moment, not speaking. Then she said, "You know why I called you in?" He nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "Because of the video." She gave a small smile. "That's part of it, but not all." He looked confused. "I wanted to talk about what comes next," she continued. "What we do after we make a mistake matters more than the mistake itself." He nodded again, unsure what to say. She leaned back in her chair. "You've been with this department for what, 8 years?" "Yes, ma'am." "That's a long time," she said. "You've seen a lot. You know how this job can change a person." He looked down. "It does, sometimes not in a good way." Ava nodded. "You're right. The uniform gives us power, but it can also build walls if we're not careful." She paused before continuing. "Tell me something, officer. When you spilled that water on me, what were you thinking?" He swallowed hard. "Honestly, Chief, I wasn't thinking. I was frustrated. I just wanted to feel in control of something. I didn't mean for it to go that far." She nodded slowly, her eyes steady on him. "You know, I didn't report you that day. I could have. I could have filed a complaint or made sure you were suspended." He looked up, surprised. "Why didn't you?" "Because anger doesn't teach," she said softly. I wanted you to see yourself, to really see the person behind that badge. Sometimes the only way people change is when they face who they've become." He sat in silence for a moment. Her words hit deeper than any punishment could. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "Not just for that day, but for forgetting why I joined this job in the first place." She smiled faintly. "Then maybe there's something we can work with." He looked at her, unsure what she meant. "I'm starting a new program," she said. "Community Partnership Initiative. Officers will spend time in local schools, community centers, and youth shelters. Listening, learning, building trust again. I want you to be part of it." His eyes widened. "You want me?" "Yes," she said firmly. "You have experience. And now you have perspective. That's valuable, as if you're willing to use it." He hesitated. "Do you really think people will listen to me after what happened?" She folded her hands on the desk. "Maybe not right away, but respect isn't something you demand. It's something you rebuild one step at a time." He nodded slowly. "I'll do it." Ava smiled slightly. "Good. You'll start tomorrow. The first stop is a youth center downtown. Talk to the kids. Listen to their stories. No speeches, no authority, just be human." He stood up, feeling both nervous and grateful. "Thank you, Chief." "Don't thank me yet," she said with a hint of humor. "Thank me after you've made a difference." He left her office feeling lighter than he had in weeks. For the first time since the video, he felt like maybe he had a chance to make things right. The next day, he drove to the youth center. It was a small brick building with colorful murals on the walls. Children played basketball outside while others sat under a tree talking. He walked in, his uniform neatly pressed, but he tried to keep his posture relaxed. Inside, a volunteer greeted him warmly. "You must be from the department," she said. "The kids are excited to meet an officer." He smiled awkwardly. "I'm not sure they'll be excited once they know who I am." She raised an eyebrow. "Then give them a reason to be." He followed her into a large room where a group of teenagers sat chatting. When they saw the uniform, some went quiet. A few crossed their arms. He could feel the tension immediately. He cleared his throat. "Hey everyone. I'm here to talk. Or listen, mostly." One boy in the front said, "Cops only come here when something's wrong." The officer nodded. "You're right. And that's part of the problem. Maybe it's time we come here just to understand." The boy looked unsure, but the honesty in the officer's tone made him stay quiet. For the next hour, the officer listened as the kids talked about their experiences, about being stopped for no reason, about feeling scared instead of safe. He didn't interrupt. He didn't defend himself. He just listened. When one girl asked him, "Do you even care about people like us?" He paused before answering. "I didn't used to," he admitted. "I got so used to seeing the uniform that I forgot about the people. But I'm trying to remember again." The room fell silent for a moment. Then the girl nodded slowly. By the end of the day, a few of the kids smiled when they saw him leave. It wasn't much, but it was a start. When he returned to the station that evening, Ava was waiting in the hallway. "How was it?" she asked. He smiled for the first time in days. "Different, hard, but good," she nodded. "That's how growth feels." Over the next few weeks, he kept visiting the center. He helped organize small events, joined local cleanup projects, and even played basketball with the kids. Slowly, people began to see him differently. Some recognized him from the viral video, but instead of anger, they showed surprise at his change. One afternoon, while handing out food at a shelter, a man approached him and said, "You're that cop from the video, right?" He froze for a moment. "Yeah, that was me." The man nodded. "You messed up, but at least you're trying to fix it. That means something." The word stayed with him. Back at the station, Ava continued to keep an eye on his progress. Sometimes she would stop by and ask simple questions. "How are you feeling about it?" Or "What did you learn today?" Each time, his answers grew more thoughtful. One day, after a long week of outreach work, he knocked on her office door again. "Chief," he said, "I just wanted to thank you for giving me another chance." She looked up from her papers and smiled. "You earned it." He hesitated before adding, "I used to think leadership was about power. Now I see it's about patience." Ava nodded. "That's a lesson some never learn." He smiled faintly. "You know, Chief, when you didn't report me that day, that changed everything. If you'd punished me right away, I probably would have just been angry. But you let me face it myself. That hurt more in a good way." She smiled softly. "Sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones we teach through grace, not punishment." He nodded. I'll remember that. As he left her office, he felt a quiet sense of peace. The past couldn't be erased, but maybe it could be rewritten, not by pretending it never happened, but by doing better from now on. That night, as he walked home, he stopped by the same coffee shop where it all began. The barista recognized him immediately, but didn't say anything. He ordered a cup of coffee and waited in line, just like everyone else. When it was his turn, he smiled at the person next to him and said, "You can go first." It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. A few months passed since the coffee shop incident, and the officer's life had changed more than he ever expected. The morning rush to put on his uniform didn't feel the same anymore. The badge that once gave him pride now carried a quiet reminder of humility. He had learned how fragile respect could be, and how hard it was to earn it back once it was lost. Every week he spent hours at the youth center, listening, talking, helping, and sometimes just sitting with people who needed someone to hear them. Slowly, people who had once avoided him started to greet him with a smile. The same kids who had looked at him with suspicion now waved when he entered the building. One afternoon, while he was helping to paint a wall at the center, his phone buzzed. It was a message from the department. "Meeting with Chief Johnson tomorrow morning. Mandatory." He wiped the paint off his hands and sighed. He wasn't nervous anymore, at least not like before, but he respected her enough to know that every meeting had meaning. The next morning he arrived at her office on time. Ava was already there, sitting behind her desk, her calm expression unchanged. "Morning, Chief," he greeted politely. "Good morning," she replied. "How have things been going at the community center?" "Better than I thought," he said with a small smile. "The kids there, they're real. They don't sugarcoat anything, but they've started to trust me." Ava nodded thoughtfully. "That's good to hear. Trust is earned through consistency, not words." He nodded. "I'm starting to understand that." She looked at him for a moment, then said, "I think it's time for something more challenging." He straightened up, unsure where this was going. "I want you to work directly with the internal integrity team for the next few weeks," she said. "You'll be observing officers in the field, seeing how they handle community interactions. You'll report back to me." He blinked. "You want me to evaluate other officers?" "Not evaluate," she corrected. "Observe. Learn. Sometimes, seeing your old habits in others helps you understand how far you've come, or how far you still have to go." He hesitated, then nodded. "I'll do it." The next few days were uncomfortable in a different way. He rode along with other officers, watching how they dealt with people. Some were kind, respectful, and patient. Others, not so much. One afternoon, he was paired with an officer named Dale. Dale was loud, confident, and impatient, the same way he used to be. When they stopped to talk to a group of teenagers hanging around outside a store, Dale's tone was sharp. "What are you all doing here?" he asked, his hand resting on his belt. The teens looked nervous. "Just talking," one of them said. "Talking," Dale repeated with a smirk. "Looks like you're up to something." The officer watching beside him felt his stomach tighten. It was like watching a mirror from the past. He stepped forward and said calmly, "Hey, Dale, why don't we give them a minute? It doesn't look like they're doing anything wrong." Dale frowned. "You getting soft on me?" "No," he said quietly. "Just fair." The teenagers looked at him, surprised by his tone. After a moment, Dale sighed and backed off. They left the area, and the officer felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. He knew how easy it was to cross that line between control and cruelty. That night, he sat at home, thinking about how many times he'd acted like Dale, how many people he'd made feel small just because he could. The realization stung, but it also made him more determined. The next morning, he reported to Ava's office to give his update. She listened carefully, hands folded on her desk. "So," she said, "what did you see out there?" He took a breath. "I saw myself, the person I used to be." Her eyes softened. "And how did that feel?" "Hard," he admitted. "Because now I understand what it looks like from the outside. It's ugly. I didn't see it before." She nodded. "That's what growth looks like. Painful but honest." He looked up. Chief, can I ask something? Of course. Why did you give me this chance? After what I did, you had every right to end my career. She thought for a moment, then said quietly, because people gave me chances too. When I was new, not everyone treated me with respect. Some made me feel like I didn't belong. I could have become bitter. But someone once told me, you can't fight hate with hate. You have to lead by example. He listened closely, every word sinking in. You see, she continued, for some people, power makes them louder. For others, it makes them wiser. The badge can't tell the difference, only your choices can. He nodded slowly. I think I finally get it. Ava smiled slightly. Good. Because I'm not done testing you. He raised an eyebrow. There's more? She laughed softly. There's always more. A few days later, Ava called him into a community town hall meeting. It was organized by local residents who wanted to voice their concerns about the police. It was the kind of meeting that made most officers uncomfortable. Open questions, strong emotions, and sometimes harsh criticism. When he arrived, the room was already full. People sat in folding chairs, murmuring among themselves. A few recognized him from the viral video months ago and whispered quietly. Ava stood at the front of the room, greeting people as they came in. She gestured for him to join her. Today, she said, you'll speak for the department, answer their questions. Listen, truly listen. No excuses, no defensiveness. His eyes widened. Me? She nodded. You've lived both sides now. They need to hear from someone who understands that. He swallowed hard, but nodded. All right. When the meeting began, people didn't hold back. They talked about being mistreated, about fear, about feeling unseen. He listened, his chest heavy. Then someone stood up and pointed. You're the officer from that video, aren't you? The room went quiet. He took a deep breath. Yes, he said simply. That was me. A few people murmured in surprise. I was wrong that day, he said. I forgot what my badge stood for. But I've spent every day since trying to make it right, not through words, but through actions. An older woman in the front row asked, Why should we believe you? He looked at her sincerely. You shouldn't, not because I say so, but because I'll keep showing up until I earn that belief. There was silence for a moment. Then someone clapped. Just one person at first, then another, until a small ripple of applause filled the room. Ava stood at the side, her eyes warm but proud. After the meeting, she walked up to him. You handled that well, she said. I was terrified, he admitted with a laugh. That's good, she said. Fear keeps us honest. Over the next few weeks, his confidence grew, but not the kind that came from power. It was quieter, grounded in understanding. He began mentoring younger officers, sharing his story with them. Some listened, some rolled their eyes, but he didn't mind. He knew change took time. One day, Ava invited him to join her for coffee, at the same shop where everything had started. When they walked in, the barista recognized them both immediately. The same shop, the same corner, but everything felt different now. They sat down by the window. Ava smiled and said, Funny how life circles back. He nodded. Yeah. Feels strange being back here. The barista brought over their drinks with a smile. On the house, she said softly. I saw what you did at the town hall. That took courage. He thanked her, humbled. For a moment they sat in silence, just sipping their coffee. The sound of the city outside filled the space between them. You know, Ava said after a while, when I first saw you in this shop, I thought you were just another officer with too much pride, but I also saw something else, the potential to change. He looked down at his cup. I'm still changing, he said quietly. That's all any of us can do, she said. He smiled faintly. I used to think respect was something people owed me. Now I realize it's something I have to give first. Ava nodded approvingly. Then you've learned the most important lesson. As they left the coffee shop, the sunlight spilled across the street, just like that first morning months ago. Only this time, the man who walked beside her wasn't the same one who had spilled a cup of water out of arrogance. He was someone humbled by his own mistakes, shaped by kindness, and guided by a leader who believed in redemption. And for the first time in a long while, he felt truly at peace, not because the world had changed, but because he had. Weeks had gone by since the meeting at the coffee shop, and life around the city was slowly returning to its rhythm. The officer had settled into a new routine, one that wasn't about control or power, but about quiet service. He no longer rushed to be seen or praised. He just did his job, spoke kindly, and left each day with a calm heart. One morning, as he parked outside the station, he noticed Chief Ava standing near her car, talking to a few community members. She waved him over with a small smile. "Good morning," he greeted her, adjusting his jacket. "Morning," she replied. "How's the week been treating you?" "Busy but good," he said. "Feels like the community is finally starting to trust me a little." "That's because you've earned it," she said. "And that brings me to something important." He tilted his head. "What's that?" Ava looked thoughtful. "I have a final task for you. Something that will show me if you're truly ready to move forward." He frowned slightly. "Another assignment?" "Not just another one," she said. "This one's different. It's personal." She handed him a small folder. Inside was a report, a case about an elderly man who had filed several complaints against the police for mistreatment. The officer scanned the paper and his stomach tightened. The man's name was one he recognized, someone he'd personally confronted months ago, back when he still carried that sharp, prideful attitude. "I remember him," he said quietly. "He was loud, angry." "Maybe he had reason to be," Ava replied gently. "He's refused to speak to any officer since then. I want you to go see him. Talk to him. Not as a cop, but as a person." He hesitated. "You think he'll even open the door for me?" Ava smiled faintly. "That depends on how you knock." The next day, he drove to the old neighborhood where the man lived. The streets were narrow, lined with worn-out houses and cracked sidewalks. He parked in front of a small, faded yellow house with peeling paint and a sagging porch. For a moment, he just sat there, gripping the steering wheel. His heart beat faster than it should have. Then, taking a deep breath, he stepped out of the car and walked up to the door. He knocked softly. No answer. He waited, then knocked again. After a few seconds, the door creaked open a few inches. An old man with tired eyes and a suspicious frown looked out. "What do you want?" the man asked sharply. "It's me," the officer said carefully. "I'm here to apologize." The old man stared for a moment, confused. "Apologize? For what?" "For how I treated you last time we met," he said quietly. "You probably don't remember, but I was rude. I didn't listen. I thought I was doing my job, but I was just making things worse." The old man's expression hardened. "Oh, I remember. You were the one who told me to calm down when I said someone broke into my yard. You acted like it was nothing." The officer nodded slowly. "You're right. And I'm sorry for that." The man's hand tightened on the edge of the door. He didn't say anything for a while. Finally, he sighed and opened the door wider. "Come in." The house smelled faintly of old books and coffee. The living room was small but clean, filled with old photographs on the wall. Pictures of children, birthdays, and long-gone family gatherings. They sat down in silence for a moment. The officer looked around, unsure how to start. "I used to think being a cop meant always being in control," he said finally. "But I've learned it means being responsible. For every word, every look, every action." The old man didn't respond right away. He just studied him with cautious eyes. "Do you really think saying sorry fixes what you did?" he asked. "No," the officer said quietly, "but it's where I have to start." There was another long pause. Then the old man leaned back in his chair and said, "You know, my son wanted to be a police officer once, but after how he saw us treated, he gave up. Said he didn't want to wear a badge that people feared." The officer's throat tightened. "I don't blame him. I would have felt the same." The old man's eyes softened slightly. "So why are you still wearing yours?" "Because now I know what it's supposed to mean," he said. "It's not about power anymore. It's about protection. I can't undo the past, but I can make sure I never repeat it. Not with anyone." The old man looked down at his hands for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "You've got a lot of work to do." "I know," the officer replied. That's why I came. To start it properly. For the first time, the old man gave a small nod. All right. You can start by helping me fix that fence outside. The one that got broken last year. You remember, the one you said wasn't your problem. The officer smiled faintly. I'd be happy to. They spent the afternoon outside, working side by side. The sun was warm, the air quiet except for the soft creak of wood and the rustle of leaves. At first the old man barely spoke, but as the hours passed, he began to tell stories about his late wife, about the neighborhood when it was full of kids playing, about how much things had changed. The officer listened, really listened. Every word felt like a small bridge being built between them. When the fence was finally standing straight again, the old man wiped his hands on his pants and said, "Not bad for a city cop." The officer chuckled. Not bad for a stubborn old man either. They both laughed, the sound light and unexpected. As the sun began to set, the officer prepared to leave. But before he could reach his car, the old man called out, "Hey!" He turned. "You keep doing what you're doing," the old man said. "Maybe things can get better after all." The officer nodded with gratitude. That's the plan. Driving back that evening, he felt a quiet peace settle over him. It wasn't pride, and it was something deeper. Forgiveness, maybe. Or understanding. He didn't know for sure, but he knew it mattered. When he reached the station, Ava was waiting in her office, just as calm as always. "Well?" she asked. "I met him," he said. "We talked. And we built his fence." Ava's eyebrows lifted slightly. "His fence?" He smiled. "Long story. But I think he finally believes I meant what I said." She nodded slowly, her eyes thoughtful. "Good. You did what most people never have the courage to do, face their past." He looked at her. "You planned this, didn't you? You knew he'd make me work for it." Ava's smile was small but knowing. Some lessons have to be earned with sweat. He laughed quietly. "Guess I learned more from a fence than I ever did from a lecture." "That's the beauty of humility," she said softly. "It teaches without shouting." He sat there for a moment, the silence comfortable between them. Then Ava leaned back and said, "There's one more thing I want you to understand." He looked at her curiously. "What's that?" "Redemption isn't a finish line," she said. "It's a road. Some days you'll walk it easily and some days you'll stumble. What matters is that you keep walking." Her words settled deep in his heart. He nodded slowly. "I will." "Good," she said. "Because people are watching, not just to see if you've changed, but to see if change is possible at all." He understood what she meant. His journey wasn't just about him anymore. It was about everyone who had ever been wronged or misjudged, and everyone who still believed people could change. As he left her office that evening, the city outside felt different. Not louder or brighter, just more alive. People walked by, each carrying their own stories, their own battles, and for the first time in a long while he felt connected to them all. He no longer saw faces as strangers or threats. He saw human beings, tired, hopeful, angry, afraid, and beautiful in their own ways. That night, as he sat alone on his porch, he looked up at the quiet sky and thought about how far he'd come. From arrogance to awareness, from pride to purpose, from a man who spilled a cup of water in anger to one who understood what it meant to truly serve. He smiled to himself. The journey wasn't over, and not even close. But for the first time, he was walking the right road. The next few months rolled by quietly. The days felt lighter now, more peaceful. The officer no longer dreaded putting on his uniform. Every morning, he looked at it hanging on the rack, clean, pressed, shining, and remembered the promise he had made to himself, to wear it with humility, not pride. He had become something of a quiet example in the department. Younger officers came to him for advice. Some asked questions about procedures. Others just wanted to talk. He never lectured them. He simply told them stories. Stories about mistakes, lessons, and second chances. The kind of honesty that made people stop and think. Ava watched all this silently. She didn't say much, but she noticed. She saw how he carried himself, how he spoke to people now, how he made sure no one around him felt unheard. His growth wasn't loud, it was steady. One morning, she called him into her office again. Her calm expression told him this wasn't about paperwork. "You've come a long way," she said. "I'm proud of what you've done." He smiled slightly. "Thank you, Chief, but I still feel like I've got a lot to learn." "That's a good sign," she said. "It means you're not done growing." He sat down curious. So what's next? Ava leaned back in her chair. I want you to take on a temporary assignment, something that will test how well you handle pressure now. What kind of assignment? He asked. Training supervisor, she replied. You'll mentor a group of new recruits for 6 weeks. Teach them what it means to wear the badge right. His eyes widened a little. You want me to teach? Ava nodded. Not teach, guide. Share what you've learned. They'll see things differently when it comes from someone who's been through it the hard way. He took a deep breath. All right, he said with a small smile. I'll do my best. The following week, he stood in front of a room full of new recruits, young faces, nervous smiles, some eager, some uncertain. It reminded him of who he used to be. He started by telling them what nobody had told him when he first joined. This badge, he said, holding it up, doesn't make you powerful. It makes you responsible. People will test you. Some will hate you just because of what you wear. But your job isn't to fight back, it's to stay calm, stay human, and remember why you chose this path. The recruits listened quietly, their eyes fixed on him. He didn't sound like a man reading from a rule book. He sounded like someone who had lived every word. Over the next few weeks, he took them out for training runs, field visits, and community meetings. He made sure they saw what real service looked like, helping a homeless man find a shelter, talking gently to a scared kid, or just listening when someone was upset. He noticed one recruit in particular, a young woman who reminded him of his old self. Confident, bold, a little too quick to speak. She often argued with him during discussions, challenging his views. One day, after a long session, she walked up to him and said, Sir, why do we need to be so patient with people who don't even respect us? He looked at her for a moment, then said quietly, Because respect isn't a trade. You don't give it to get it. You give it because it's the right thing to do. She frowned. But what if they still hate you? He smiled faintly. Then at least you'll know you didn't become what they expected you to be. She didn't answer, but he could tell she was thinking about it. As the weeks passed, the recruits started to change. They asked better questions, spoke more thoughtfully, and handled mock scenarios with calm and empathy. Watching them grow gave him a sense of peace he hadn't felt before. On the final day of the training program, Ava came to observe the closing session. The recruits sat in a semicircle as he spoke. Every person you meet out there has a story, he said. Sometimes it's written on their face. Sometimes it's buried deep. You might not always understand it, but you can always choose kindness. That's what makes you different from the ones who forget what this badge stands for. When he finished, Ava stood and clapped softly. The recruits followed. After they left, she walked up to him. You did well, she said. They respect you, not because of your title, but because you were honest. He smiled. I just told them the truth, she nodded. That's all it takes sometimes. A few days later, something unexpected happened. It was a rainy evening and the streets were slick with water. The officer was driving home when he saw flashing lights ahead. 2 patrol cars had stopped a vehicle near the old marketplace. Instinct made him slow down. As he got closer, he saw a young officer arguing with a woman near the car. The tension in the air was thick. Without thinking, he pulled over and stepped out, walking calmly toward them. Everything all right here? He asked. The young officer turned. Sir, this woman was speeding and refused to hand over her license. The woman, soaked from the rain, crossed her arms. I wasn't speeding. He's lying. He glanced at both of them. The officer's tight jaw, the woman's trembling hands. He saw what was really happening. Fear, miscommunication, pride. Hey, he said softly to the woman. Let's take a breath, okay? You're cold, he's tense, and this weather's not helping anyone. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. He turned to the officer. You mind if I talk to her for a second? The young man stepped back reluctantly. The officer looked at the woman. You don't have to be afraid. Let's just handle this calmly. After a few minutes of gentle conversation, she finally reached into her purse and handed over her license. I just get nervous around police, she admitted quietly. Bad experiences before, he nodded. I understand. But not every officer is the same. Some of us are trying to make things better. When it was done, the tension had melted away. The young officer looked humbled, realizing how close he had been to making things worse. As they drove back to the station, the young officer said, Sir, how did you do that? She was furious. He smiled faintly. I've been on both sides of that argument. Sometimes people just need to feel seen. The younger man looked thoughtful. I'll remember that. Later that night, Ava called him after hearing about what happened. I got a report from the scene, she said. Sounds like you diffused a bad situation. He chuckled softly. Just did what you taught me, she paused. No, she said. You did what you learned. Her words made him smile. The next morning, Ava asked him to meet her at the same coffee shop where everything had begun so long ago. When he arrived, she was already there, sitting by the window. 2 cups of coffee waiting. Full circle, she said with a smile as he sat down. Feels that way, he replied. They sat for a moment, watching the city outside. People rushing by, cars splashing through puddles. Life moving on. You know, Ava said, when I first met you here, I saw someone who had forgotten what his badge meant. But now, she looked at him with quiet pride. Now I see someone who finally understands it. He smiled. I think I do. The badge isn't a weapon or a shield. It's a reminder to stay human, she nodded. That's the lesson most never learn. He looked around the cafe, the same place, but everything felt new. The smell of coffee, the soft chatter, the warmth. He thought about how much had changed, not the world around him, but the world inside him. As they finished their coffee, Ava said softly, You've come a long way. But remember, growth never ends, he nodded. I'll keep walking the road, she smiled. That's all I ever wanted to hear. When they stepped outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds had begun to clear and the evening sun broke through, painting the wet streets with a soft golden glow. For a moment, they both stood quietly, watching the light reflect off the puddles. Then Ava said, You should be proud, not of the badge, but of the man wearing it. He didn't answer right away. He just smiled. A real, quiet smile that came from deep within. As she walked away, he stood there, hands in his pockets, breathing in the cool air. The city was alive again, full of people, stories, and second chances. He thought back to that first day when he had spilled water on a stranger out of arrogance and ignorance. That moment had changed everything. It had broken him in a way that made him rebuild himself stronger, kinder, wiser. He looked down at his reflection in the puddle, the same uniform, the same face but a different man, and for the first time, he didn't see a cop, he saw a human being.